Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. I'm your host, derbiologist, and joining me again this week is Capping with Candace. Candace here. Candace, this week we are going to talk about the Lewis and the Withers and also the Donn Handicap, a couple of three-year-old races. We're back to the points races this week, and the Withers, seven-horse field, but I think you can make the case for about five of these horses.
Maybe you could. I don't know. When I look at this race, I think that El Kibir really stands out. I mean, this is a horse who, at least to this point, I think has really proven himself to be one of the top in this crop at this point. I mean, we'll see how he does going forward, stretching out in distance, but his last few efforts have been really sharp, particularly his last two, winning over at Churchill Downs over Imperia, and then last time out here at Aqueduct, beating NASA and General Bellamy, who shows back up here. He's drawn outside in the seven post of the whole field. There's only seven horses here, and I think for him that's a really nice post. He's a horse who likes to be out on the outside, kind of stalking the pace. I'd be surprised if he didn't go close here. Really, he seems to have a pretty big edge on these, both class-wise and speed figures-wise to this point. At the end of the day, I think for him, at least for me analyzing him, he's not going to be a betting price unless you're singling him in multiples, but he's one who I'm going to be really looking at as far as seeing if he can develop a little bit more versatility. At this time of the year, he's doing well in winning races, but I think I really would like to see him be able to win a race sitting just a little bit further back. He rated just off the pace last time, but I think to really be a true Kentucky Derby winning threat, he needs to be able to settle a little bit further off the pace than he has been to this point. So I'll be looking for that from him. But regardless, I think he really towers over this field. A few others to consider underneath, perhaps. One is March. He debuted on Remsen Day in a main special weight. Struggled a bit there, finished second, 5 1/4 lengths back, but really was running against a very strong rail bias that day. Came back next time out after that and won over Don't Bet with Bruno, who subsequently won at the time after that. So March is one who at least his form lines have worked out well thus far, and obviously has experience over the Aqueduct surface. So he's one who I really like underneath as well. And the other one who I'd like underneath is Far From Over. This is a Pletcher Blame colt out of an AP Indy mare named Alchemist, and that makes him a half to a mare named And Why Not, who ran in the Kentucky Oaks and finished second in the Pocahontas. So definitely was a classy mare in that family. The only reason I won't put him on top is that his win in his only race thus far was over a downgraded surface. And given his pedigree, having that Mr. Prospector, that APND Stormcat in there, I kind of wonder if he really thrived over a surface like that. So I'm going to put him underneath instead, but that Pletcher trainee looks, maybe to be one of the ones who can actually potentially contend with El Kibir making his second start, if he does in fact improve off of that effort. So I'm definitely going to go El Kibir on top. I think this is a race where you can potentially single him, but if you're looking for a little bit of value underneath, March and Far From Over appeal.
Yeah, I think LK Beer is probably the 4 to 5 favorite. I'm going to go strictly with a stable male play here. I'm going to go with Classy Class. This horse impressed me in its maiden win, and it's got some stamina influences deeper in the pedigree, but closer to the top of the pedigree. The sire and the mare are more sprinters. But that 117.2 in his debut race was a nice race, got a big speed figure. And then, of course, he ran wide against that bias the last time. And also, I just think, halfway down the stretch, he was only about 2-3 lengths out of it. And then he ended up losing by 9. And I think they just packed it in. And so I think getting the rail, having a little bit of speed, I think he's very playable. And I like Far From Over. I just like the 5 workouts since the last race. He really showed some grit beating that in that maiden special weight the last time. And I think the pace pressure is going to be just enough to really test LKB a little bit more this time. And so I'm going with those two, but I really like Classy Class, and Far From Over would be my other pick in this race. Otherwise, like March is solid. General Bellamy, can he make up that 12 lengths, or where is he kind of at here?
I think you can make a case for it just because that surface was a wet surface. So if you think that he didn't like it and he had a little bit of trouble at the start as well, I think there's a reason why you could expect him, to improve off of that effort, at least in comparison to El Kibir. But at the end of the day, that's a lot to make up. I think he could get closer, but I'm not sure he can really reverse that form. He is first time Lasix, however, so something to consider.
Now we go out west to the Robert Lewis, and this race has been highly anticipated for a couple of weeks. A noticeable non-entrant here was Bolo, but a 6-horse field, and really kind of take your pick. You either go Dortmund or you go Firing Line, unless you've got something up your sleeve here that you're going to tell me about.
I don't. I kind of wish I did. I'm going Dortmund here. You know, those two ran really close to each other in the Low Sound Futurity, just, you know, a head apart with Dortmund getting the win. But I really liked Dortmund's effort over Firing Line. I thought, you know, not only was he wide much of the way and just winning by a head, but I liked the way he really kind of put his head down and went, you know, down for a fight at the end, you know, a half a furlong out from the finish line. It didn't look like he was going to get there, and yet he did. Galloped out really nicely. I know, you know, after the gallop out, when they showed him, his ears were pricked and he was kind of pranced along. He looked far from a tired horse in my eyes. So I think Dortmund, to me, on the better effort there. He was pretty green throughout as well, so you know, potentially he could even improve off of that, which just makes me think there's a little bit more upside to this guy than Fiery Line. And just seeing pictures of him, you know, even training up to this and seeing video of him training up to this, he just looks so sharp. He looks so ready. He really is an imposing figure physically, I think, among these 3-year-olds. This is a really good post for him. Being on the outside, he seems to like being out there, so I think this is a good spot for him. He does carry more weight than Firing Line this time, 5 pounds more, and they were on equal turns last time, so perhaps something to consider, but I just really liked Dortmund's effort over Firing Line so much more last time, and I think he's, you know, the one of these two who I expect to have improved off of the break.
Yeah, I'm not going to bet against Dortmund. I just, since day one when he broke his maiden in Santa Anita, he just towers over this field, literally, figuratively. He's just physically a monster horse. He carries more weight. But like I mentioned, he lands light on his feet. So he is kind of an amazing horse to me. I think he is that good. I think people are underestimating that LaSalle race. It doesn't matter. He got the win. He ran wider. He's the horse that shipped to Churchill and shipped back. None of these other horses shipped. His workouts have just been phenomenal. I mean, I've seen 2-3 videos now. I mean, he's just rolling off 123 workouts, which are 135 miles. And he beat Lord Nelson by 3-4 lengths 2-3 times in a row in workouts. And maybe you don't like Lord Nelson to win the Derby, but at 7 furlongs, he ran a 123 last week.
Yeah.
So I think it's Dortmund's race to lose. I mean, I do think they're, you know, in a short field, you could get a weird pace, and Gary Stevens is on Firing Line. Who knows? Maybe it's all of a sudden a 112 and 3, and it just becomes a sprint. Then it's Firing Line might win. But I think Dortmund is the better long-term horse, and I just think he's training up a storm right now.
Yeah, and I think one thing people underestimate with that LaSalle race is that, you know, LaSalle, at least the main track for the thoroughbreds, typically has an on-pace bias that he came off of that day. And I think if I remember right, that day actually it was a pretty strong bias. And he was the horse of those 3 at the finish who came from off the pace. He was 2.5 lengths back at the first call, whereas Firing Line and Mr. Z were going head-to-head up front. So I think that could, for me, at least gives him some bonus points in there as well. You know, I totally agree. Like, his works with Lord Nelson in particular have been really standouts. I mean, just the ease with which he's beating him in workouts is kind of ridiculous considering what Lord Nelson did last week winning over Texas Red.
Should be a good race. Now, remember, both these races this week are 10 points to the winner and then 4-1 as we continue along on the road to Kentucky. Now let's take a look at the older division and the Donn Handicap. It's a grade 1, $500,000 purse. This has a lot of history and a lot of tradition, and it got some nice horses. A notable defection in this race as well.
Yeah, no Liam's map. I was disappointed. That's a horse that, you know, I do think highly of, and he just worked the other day, so it's a little bit weird. He was working, you know, at the same time as all the other Fletcher horses that are here, so a little bit weird that he's not here, but, you know, maybe at the end of the day, that's a sign that perhaps Fletcher thinks that he has distance limitations, which people have wondered about to begin with him now being slated to run in a mile race. This race now without him, I think, is actually a lot more interesting. He was going to be, clear lone speed in there. Now without him, I think you're looking at a little bit more of a slowish but contested pace. I expect Constitution to go forward. He likes to be on the lead. He's been on the lead and first call of almost every one of his races. I don't like him breaking from the rail, however. I think that puts a lot of pressure on him getting out of the gate cleanly, which he very often does not do. So, this race, more than ever, he needs to get out of the gate cleanly. And, if he doesn't, he can be in big trouble because he tends to really get ranked when he's behind other horses. The other horse who I expect to go forward is Blue Tone, who ships in from California. An honest enough type, likes to be on the lead. But both him and Constitution are horses that when they've won races, they've been out front, but haven't necessarily set fast paces by any means. They tend to kind of walk the dog a little bit, which is why I don't expect this pace to be a fast one. For me, I think I'm just trying to look for a little bit of value in here. I think, now without Liam's map in here, I think Lee is really going to be heavily, heavily favored. But I think, his price on the tote is not going to be indicative of how dominant he is over this field, which is why I'm going to look elsewhere. I like Protonico on top, but I have a feeling that my co-host here likes him on top too, so I'm going to let him talk about him while I kind of focus on the others I like. The other one I really like is Sloan Avenue, who comes in here from Europe, undefeated over the all-weather surfaces, hasn't been tested in this class yet, but the pedigree screams dirt. Candy ride out of an AP Indian mare named Apt. He's a half to Carve, who we know here as a graded stakes winning dirt router. So Sloan Avenue, I think, is really interesting in this spot, and even more so now without Liam's map in here. I don't think the pace is going to be as much of a shock to the system as it could have possibly been. And the other one I'll use is Prayer for Relief, simply because I think he's going to be a really big price here. He's so honest, always runs his race for the most part, and his best efforts and biggest speed figures have come off of races where he's been forwardly placed. So I think a race like this where we're not going to get a really fast pace, he's drawn outside, I think this is the type of race where he can go forward, sit close, and be in it at the end.
Yeah, I think with Liam's map out of there, it kind of changes a little bit of the pace. I think it'll slow down a little bit now. It will be contested. I mean, Blue Tone's an honest type on the front end. Constitution is 3 for 3 at Gulfstream, loves to be on the engine, but he's not really a setting fast fractions type horse. I'm really anti-Lee here. That last race was really just against conditioned allowance horses. He's had one race in a year. And a year ago, he beat a bunch of turf horses on the dirt. I just think he's way overranked, and I'm not really, I think Pletcher is not running Liam's map because he's got 3 loaded barrels here. My top pick's going to be Constitution. I just think he's undefeated at the track. He goes inside. I do like Protonico. I think he has a good shot here. If it does get into a little bit of a speed duel and somebody needs to close, I think he's good. And then Commissioner. He's a little bit slower, but he plugs along, and I think he's fit and ready. I just think the 3 Pletchers here are going to run 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3. I just think at the end of the day, he said, why waste another bullet? Because I think he can beat Lee with any one of those 3, to be honest with you. And it's only a $500,000 purse.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you like. I don't know if either of us has ever picked Constitution on him, ever. He gets a much more of a bad rap on this show than a good one. So it's interesting that you pick him. Commissioner, I'm intrigued that you like him, though. For me, I see this race as still being too short.
Yeah, but he just seems to grind out those 113 fractions, and I'm not. They might only do a 112. He might only be 4 or 5 lengths off the pace. I don't know. Yeah. It just seems like even Lee's not nobody really. Liam's map was the only horse that could do 110 and change.
Yeah.
And so now I just even Blue Tone, I guess he's kind of intriguing a little bit to me. Just because who knows, what if he gets out there and the change of surface or something like that, he may perk up a little bit. Not that he looks like, I don't know. You just never know with Gulfstream. It's been playing very fair this meet, but every once in a while you just get those weird days. That's really why I'm picking Constitution. I just have a sneaky feeling maybe they'll really grade it up tight and it'll be inside and front running, and and all of a sudden Constitution's out there running a 111 at the rail and kind of just skips away.
Yeah, I mean, this race to me is really intriguing because, ever since the news of Liam's map not running came out, all I've seen on Twitter is people saying, well, it's over, Lee's winning the race, and I just don't see, you know, by any angle that he's so much more dominant over the others in this field. So I really look at this race as a really good betting opportunity because I just don't think his price is going to justify his value in here by any stretch of the mind.
Yeah, I mean, we both kind of seem to be thinking the same thing, and I just, last year, I mean, I remember that race. People were like, well, why was he 6-1 in this race last year? Why? Because nobody thought he was going to win. I mean, that's why. And he ran one race in a year. Like, now they're starting to use that he raced against Wise Dan, but whenever Wise Dan won, we always said all he beat was Lee. Like, I think they're reversing the psychology of it, and nothing's really changed. Like, he's not any better taking a year off.
No.
And he was never this dirt monster before, and he's 6 years old.
No, and just I think some of the prices are going to be so weird with him being short. I mean, people who really love him, I think you have to really consider the fact that he's going to be 3 to 5, 4 to 5, and a horse like Prayer for Relief, who was a half length behind him last time, is going to be 10 to 1, 15 to 1. Like, that's where I have issues taking a horse like that. Just to me, it doesn't make sense on a price scale from a value standpoint. It's one thing if you really towered over this field, but I don't see it at all. I think he can certainly win. I think that his running style fits well for a field like this, but there's no way I could touch him with a 10-foot pole at 4 to 5.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, and I just don't know if he's that much better than 4 or 5 of these horses anyways. So I'm leaning that way. All right, pool number 2, Kentucky Derby Future Wager. Give me one horse that somebody should bet in pool number 2 and a quick synopsis why.
Oh, wow. I think for me, it's tough because so many times in these pools, we don't get a lot of value, and I think people a lot of times don't want to take short prices, but in these types of pools, I tend to, really try to put my money on horses who I think are going to be in the field. So for me, I would be looking at horses who have a substantial amount of points already. A horse like El Khaibir, I mean, I know that he's going to be a shorter price on there, but he has the points, and that the connections are going to run him. So that's the type of horse I tend to lean to in these Derby Future Wagers where, we don't have a lot of horses there, so we don't get the crazy big prices that you can get in Vegas. So I think I'm going to go for El Khaibir, but, I can certainly see why people wouldn't want to take him at the price that he is.
I'm going to say, you know what, one horse to just look at is it's a knockout. He's, I think he's definitely going to be 60, 70 to 1. He hasn't ran in a stakes race yet. Nobody's really talking about him. He has no points, but I think to me, the whole point of the future wager is to try to guess a horse that might make the field. Yeah. I'd rather have 70 to 1 on a horse that may or may not make the field than 20 to 1 on a horse like El Khaibir that's going to get in the field. I guess I look at it completely opposite. So it's a knockout is kind of a all or nothing. And he's got 2 races to get there though. And he's by Lemon Drop Kid. And I think he's only had 2 lifetime races. I just think he's going to drift up to 60 or 70 to 1. And exactas with him will just be huge. They'll be paying $3-4 grand. So that you really can't call any exacta that pays $3 grand in underlay if it were to come in.
Well, I know, and I know for me, pool 2 isn't one that I typically play a lot. I know last year I went really heavy in pool 3, and I think that's one where you can really see some of, these overlays. I remember last year in pool 3, we were seeing Samrat and Uncle Si and Vickers in trouble, at crazy prices, both alone and in exactas with the field. And, at that point in time, all 3 of them were in the race, and you're getting them at 71 in futures. So, I would pay attention going forward for horses like that. I think people, a lot of times tend to knock winners of the New York races, and I'll take 71 on a horse who's going to be in the field any day of the week.
Yeah, pool 3 is more value, and you can actually start to use a few more strategies. I'm just going to throw a few exactas and win ticket on it's a knockout if he's over 50 to 1, and then we'll see what he does in the Fountain of Youth and the Florida Derby, hopefully, or Fountain of Youth, maybe Bluegrass, who knows. Like I said, I just like the Lemon Drop Kid. Nobody's really talking about him. And I think he's going to, I mean, he's not going to be like 100-1, but I think he's definitely going to be 50, 60-1. And that's kind of a fun bet.
Well, and I
So,
think in these two, like we've seen, sometimes the value really is in the exactas, and pay attention to that. You know, if you play a horse both either, you know, over or under the field, sometimes you can get monstrous prices that are definitely overlays compared to what they are as a win bet.
yeah, no, it's a knockout over the field that might pay $500. And, you know, on the day of the Derby, you might have 5, 6 horses that could be in that exacta. So should be fun. I'm looking forward to the cross country pick 4 this week. And then next week we go to the El Camino Real as one of our spotlight races to Golden Gate. That's going to do it for another edition of Down to the